Welcome everyone to the regular meeting of the King County Regional Homeless Authority. I call this meeting to order. This meeting is going to be conducted via Zoom. All attendees will be muted until public comment. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. All visual, verbal, and written comments are public record. To the board, we will have various times to communicate back and forth, and we just ask that a simple housekeeping rule be kept. On the right-hand side of your screen is where you click to raise your hand. And that's just a simple chore that we would ask at every meeting. One thing I've done, and Nate might do it, I may not do it, but we have to be authentic. And after the roll call, I'll explain that. Who would on the staff would like to take roll for me? I think you're muted, Carrie.
Yep, I was going to say Sola's not here, so I'm happy to. Taking roll, we've got Carrie Anderson, Nate Caminos.
Here.
Paula Carvalho.
Here.
John Chalmanek. Gordon McHenry Jr.
Present.
Harold Odom.
Here.
Damian Patenaude.
Here.
Adrienne Quinn.
Here.
Michael Ramos.
Here.
Sarah Rankin. Simha Reddy.
Present.
And Lamont Green.
Here.
Okay, great. That is 9 people. We have a quorum.
Hallelujah. Thank you, Carrie. So at this point in time, we do land acknowledgement. And as you will know, I'll be calling on every member to participate fully. And first person was Juanita. Second person is going to be Mr. Gordon McHenry. I was participating in something at United Way, and I saw that he, United Way, had a land acknowledgement. And in my studies, someone told me that if you continue doing the same script over and over again on land acknowledgement, it becomes harmful because it doesn't stay authentic. So I welcome Gordon McHenry to do the land acknowledgement.
Appreciate having this honor. I concur that we're coming from a lot of different places. Place is important, land is important. At United Way, we use the following to acknowledge that we work on the unceded traditional land of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. This acknowledgement only becomes meaningful when combined with authentic relationships and informed actions, and acts only as a first step in honoring the land that we are all on. We encourage you to visit, in this case, uwkc.org/land for more information and to learn about actions you can take. I appreciate this opportunity to do the land acknowledgement, and I'm proud to and thoughtful to live on Coast Salish land, specifically land of the Duwamish in Upper Rainier Beach of Southeast Seattle. Thank you, Harold.
Thank you, Mr. McHenry. So public comment. We have 10 minutes on the agenda today for public comment. It'll start around 2:15. If you'd like to provide public comment, please type your name and the city you're calling from into the chat function, which is open now. And we will open it again, or be open until, until public comment period closes. Carrie will build a queue of that, and we'll call from that queue. In addition, you may use the chat function to provide written comment starting now until public comment section of this agenda closes. And with that, I turn it over to my co-chair, Nate.
Thank you, Harold. And moving on to our next item on the agenda, consent agenda items. Today we are seeking our implementation board's member approval for the following 2 business items this month. First is the approval of the draft minutes from our last meeting, April 14th, regular meeting. The second is the adoption of Resolution 2021-07, authorizing the King County Regional Homelessness Authority CEO Mark Dones as our auditing officer to submit vouchers for payment and disbursement in accordance with the fiscal manual prior to the board taking action to approve said claims. So resolution was sent in your board packet in advance of today's meeting, and the resolution itself is necessary to ensure that the authority can process warrants and electronic payments in a timely and consistent manner. Also just want to take a pause here to recognize Sarah Rankin, member of the implementation board, is here and present with us today. But going back to the resolution, I do call for a motion to approve the April 14th meeting minutes and the resolution 2021-17 as presented in the meeting packet.
So moved.
Thank you, Adrian.
Seconded.
Second, I think Paula just beat Sarah by a split second, so I'll give it to Paula there. Thank you for the motion and the second. All in favor to approve, please vote by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Any nays? Any abstentions? All right, that's it. Well, the minutes and a resolution are approved. Thank you. And now let's go on to public comment. And we said earlier that we would go to 2:15, but we'll go ahead and start now. Now we'll take public comment. We've set aside 10 minutes, as Harold mentioned, to hear from members of the public. If you do wish to comment and have not yet typed your name and the city in the chat window to be called upon, please do so now. Each individual will be given 2 minutes to comment. Carrie will call on individuals in the order they have been provided in the chat window and unmute them. Carrie will then announce that you reached your 2 minutes, ask you to finish your comment, and call on the next speaker. I will close comment period 10 minutes from now. Seeing that it's 2:11, I will do 2:21. Public comment is now open. Carrie, who do we have first in our public comment period?
All right. First up, we've got Reverend Bill Curlin Hackett. Give me just a second to enable your microphone. Okay, you are enabled and you are free to go ahead. Your time starts now.
Greetings to all of you. I have two things today. First, the Eastside Homelessness Advisory Committee has been around since about 2006. And in the past, it's been formed of jurisdictions, faith communities, nonprofits, and the homeless. Recently, we have found out that Bellevue has something called the Eastside Community Development Fund. It's being staffed or led by Kevin Wallace and Donald Summers, two movers and shakers, who I'd say represent business communities who are trying to form their own regional plan for you. And we're all concerned on the East Side about that. They're lobbying executive directors right now of Sophia Way and others, and trying to kind of overlay and force into place a regional plan for the RHA. We agreed, and I suggested that EHAC originally was formed with homeless and providers and others. And our job now, because we're not populated at all by folks who are homeless anymore, is to bring those voices back to the table. I think the Lived Experience Coalition could provide help for us on the East Side, and I'm also going to speak about this for the South End as well. Those voices are not that present around the county as I think Mark would wish they are and that you should hope they are. So the second thing I'm going to ask is that you support Mark in the full acquisition of staff that they have requested, because I think it was a little bumpy at the governing committee. And I think we need to put our actions up front and not be tinkering over what I heard as a budget debate. So good luck to all of you with those two things, but especially the regional plan. It is already trying to be subsumed by powers. So good luck. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much. Need just one moment. Next, we've got Naomi Elizabeth C. You are enabled to go ahead and speak, and I think you can unmute yourself and go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? All good? Okay, sounds good. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank the board and the team for making space this earlier this May for all of the providers to come together. I think it offered a lot of clarity and assurance for us as we go through this process. I also wanted to take an opportunity to advocate for our Seattle HSD staff who we've observed are facing significant capacity challenges as people leave in anticipation of the transition. And so just supporting them through this transition and making sure that they have the support they need as staff leave, anticipating the King County Regional Authority. So thank you for your work and look forward to continuing to collaborate.
Okay. Thank you, Naomi. And we have no one else right now signed up. Does anyone see anyone else signing up in the chat? Just want to double check I haven't skipped anyone. Okay. All right, that concludes the folks that we've had sign up for the chat, and I'm happy to keep the chat open for the next 10 minutes for any public comment that might want to be written into it.
Thank you, Carrie. Yeah, for anyone who did not have an opportunity to provide public comment and would like to do so, please feel free to incorporate that in the chat window as it'll be documented moving forward. So let's go on to our next item on the agenda. So I'll pass things over to Mark to provide their CEO report. Mark?
Hello, everybody. It's great to see you. I am excited to be 13 third day of third week, 13 days in, you know, we're humming along. So I've got 3 main updates. I'm going to share my screen, except no, I'm not. I'm going to ask Carrie to give me permission to share my screen. Thank you. And we're gonna, I've got a deck that I'm just gonna walk us through real quick. I hope this will be brief. Everybody see what I see? Fantastic. So my goals for today are to update you on the authority's financial position, to talk about timeline for staffing plan development, and to introduce some hires that have been made in the week and a half that I've been on board. And just so you're aware, this information, particularly the financial information, the staffing plan development information, will go to the governing committee at that special 20th meeting. I want to make sure that for symmetry, you all have the same information. This has already been provided to the governing committee's staff. So they have it already. We met about it last week. They were provided a version of this deck this morning. So I believe that we're in a positive position. I have asked all folks, though, to let me know if there are any questions from their principals and to set up briefings as needed. So first things first, let's talk money. So where we are for 2021 funding, there was about a total of $3.8 million allocated to Authority Startup. That is inclusive of a $600,000 estimated in-kind contribution from the county for space that we are currently not using, but it's there, and we're very grateful for not having to pay rent on it this year. The sort of color of money for those who are interested, we have COC planning grant money, document recording fee, startup funds from the city out of general fund, and that makes up the totality of the money that we have for this year. For a simplified budget, what I want to, and this is proposed in the sense that I don't have the full budget authority per the governing committee yet to do some of these things, but what's proposed is a staffing request that is essentially $1.3 million in total. That's prorated. Overhead of a roughly $2.47 million expenditure, inclusive of the in-kind rent, for a total of about $3.7 million out of that 3.8 in revenue, leaving a remainder of about $68,000. Quite thin, and I bet I'll spend that $68,000. But to be clear, right now we are cleanly in the black. Just for folks drill down, I want to give you the actuals. So looking at expenditures that have been made to date, this is where we are. Those expenditures were largely made before my tenure, right? So these are things like the the executive search firm. We have a accounting team that you all approved, right? So there have been expenditures out of that pot of money, and I want to just be clear that when we are looking at the budget, thanks to the help of that financial team and the work at city and county, we are starting to be able to disaggregate in closer to real time between total budget and actuals to date. So again, 1.3 in staffing, overhead of about $1 million for a total of about 2.3 against uncommitted revenue of about 2.3, right? Which then again leaves us $68,000 in remainder. So I want you all to know, right, that like when we're looking at the budget, we are not just sort of like continuing to look at the amount of money that was originally allocated. We are doing reconciliation to ensure that we are not going over budget in any category. Just so you're aware, I have begun to pull together, again, with a lot of help from city and county, and grateful there, what the projected admin funding is for 22. Currently, I'm looking at about $5.9 million. There is an expectation that this may go up. There are some supplemental asks, some other questions, and those are in flight. But right now, that is the projected admin budget. And so that's what we're going to work with until we get confirmation that that number changes. With that, I'm looking at headcount planning of roughly 35 people across the divisions that we're sketching out. And the salary bands are commensurate with existing positions, right? So we are not looking at significant boosts or cuts in salary. As folks apply for these jobs, if they have been working in government sector before, they will be looking at salary bands that make sense and that they are familiar with. Any questions on the financial position before I move into the next portion of this?
Adrian, did you have a question?
Mark, this might not be the right time to ask this question, but it just has to do with staffing levels. You know, my understanding is that there were a substantial number of staff at both the city and the county before, and so you know, aside from, so in many respects, this is not net new staff based on the previous staffing structures. Obviously, there needs to be additional staff for the infrastructure, also the CEO leadership, but in terms of some of the programmatic staff, many of these functions were being done previously at the city and the county. Is that true?
Yeah, so many of the functions were being done previously. I will say that like I do expect to have significant shift in role scope as we take on books of business that neither were really holding before. In terms of span, right? Just like little geographic span. And then also based on feedback that we received during the audit process that my former team worked on, right? In terms of what the posture of collaboration between staff at city and county were with providers and other folks doing the work across the county. So I think we'll see some shift in JDs and role scope and that kind of stuff. In other spaces, I think we'll see some relative stability as we sort of look at things like, you know, a data scientist doing data science work, right?
Right. And I'm sorry, Mark, I didn't mean to get into the scope of them. I was just thinking about numbers when one were to add the city staff, all home staff, the county staff that had previously been working in this realm.
Yeah. You know, I think that without going into too much detail, some of the stuff that we're looking at with regard to potential upticks in funding availability are things around budget reductions that happen inside COVID. And so I think that that is part of the question that is unanswered right now for 22. And so we're going to again, like I'm budgeting conservatively based on like, this is money that I'm positive will land in an account that we've got. And we'll see if some of the revenue streams are strong enough that we can boost some of that. Any other questions on financial position? All right, I'll keep it moving. So next, we're going to just quickly discuss timeline for staffing plan development. So the gist of what we're looking at is to begin some sub-regional planning work in earnest, like next week. That should run through about the end of August, and we'll look to produce a report on the sub-regional plans on or around September 15th. The staffing plan I intend to propose in July, based on some clarity that we get from that first sort of third of the sub-regional planning work. As I've said repeatedly, one of the things that I really want to be able to do is be clear about like why does this agency look the way that it does. You know, I've in some of my one-on-ones with you, I've said, right, so for example, if someone said to me today, how many staff have you assigned to South King County? And I was like, I'm going to put 4 people on it, right? And you said, why? I would not have an answer. I just like, I don't know, feels good to me, right? Like, that's not good. So we really do want to have a more granular sense of what the books of business are for the subregions before we start thinking about, you know, how many staff and what type of staff can cover them. So that's the primary reason for aligning the work in that way. I also think, you know, I think many of you have heard me, I certainly said at the United Way event last week, right? I believe that good policy and good governance does bubble up, right? And so I think it is actually very important that we take the time to do this work before we really get into thinking through like, what is the final architecture? How do we deploy, et cetera? I expect that we will begin contract migration around October and that will run well into next year on some of the contracts. I think that there's going to be a bit of a dance there, which, you know, we don't need to go into detail around today, around sequencing and staffing in relationship to sequencing. You don't need to worry about it, but know that there will be a dance, and know that we are already beginning to detail out what that dance looks like. Beginning in December, I expect that we will really ramp up 2022 hiring and system stand-up. That will be in relationship to our 2022 admin budgets coming online and us being able to, you know, say like, yes, we will be able to pay your salary. So that is when you will see a flurry of activity from us. And then around that time, I suspect beginning towards the middle and end of January, we will begin regional RFP development, looking to focus, I think, on mainly a 23 whole system rebid, right? I want to be really clear that like that's when I say regional RFP development, I am talking about a 23 whole system rebid. There may be other portions of the system that we seek to rebid for 22 or seek to modify as we identify again through our sub-regional planning process that they are of high priority to us. But we don't know that yet because we haven't done that work yet. So those are the interrelated timelines as they are currently looking in, I think, pretty decent detail for, you know, day 13. Any questions about this? Gordon?
Mark, impressive amount of thinking, planning, and work in 13 and maybe 13 and a half days. So just support what you're doing. I also think there'll come a time when we will all need to help work with you and your team to have some understanding around what is sub-regional planning. What does that phrase intimate? If not, what does it mean? What is system hiring people? Hiring is a pretty straightforward one, but system stand-up, it could be interpreted in a variety of ways. So that's not a criticism. I'm just saying that for as much attention that is on the regional authority and anticipation and pent up frustration, we'll probably want to help you, define some of these and set some expectations. Last thing, I love the simplicity of a calendar year as opposed to municipality and government's fiscal years, even though there may be fiscal aspects to it. The folks that are probably most interested in this can more easily adjust and resonate with the calendar year. So that's not a question, that's just a reaction, and thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. And yes, I do think that we will need to do some refinement around what does this mean? What is it going to look like? And all of that, which I believe as we get into subcommittee structure and some of that work, which I believe is also part of today's conversation to some degree, I think we'll identify like how that will happen. And I will be leaning heavily on y'all to help me evangelize. This is what this means. This is who you can talk to about it. Any other questions on timeline overview before I think I'm on time. Before I jump to the last person, which is I'm very excited about, which is there are other people who work here now.
Any other questions or comments from the board? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to.
Real quick, I just wanted to acknowledge Reverend Carrie Anderson joined, if you didn't say that yet and I missed it. And then also Paula did want to know if the PowerPoint could be shared out with the rest of the members. Mark.
Yep. Happy to send it out as it's a PDF. I can send it out right after the meeting. And good afternoon, Pastor Anderson. All right. So the last piece of business that I have for you all today is that we have hired some people. I am very excited about that because as much fun as this has been as a one-person show, it has not been fun. And so really excited to begin to have some help. Really glad to announce today that we have hired Peter Lynn as our Chief Program Officer. He is also going to join us shortly to say a little bit about himself. This will be a really integral role for us. Peter will oversee the entirety of our programs. Just a little bit about Peter, I'm sure he will say more. He comes directly from having the experience of being the inaugural director for the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, which is one of our few sister regional authorities in the country. Before that, Peter ran Section 8 for the city, for the city and county, I believe, of LA, and then also Section 8 for New York City. 20 plus years of housing and homelessness administrative experience. Really, 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 really smart. And can tell you more about himself shortly. Ann Martins will be joining our team as the Director of External Affairs and Communications. Comes most recently with 6 years of experience at Gates as a communications officer, doing a significant amount of work around homelessness and housing. Ann and I really resonate around the belief that like government can be cool and fun if we want it to be. And so I believe that she will be a strong spokesperson for the authority and will bring much needed capacity to our ability to, convene and to make sure that we are in communication in a steady and robust way with the right people. Anyone who has interacted with me over the last 2 weeks knows that like my calendar has just been a nightmare as I'm trying to make sure that I'm talking to all the people. I woke up, I think it was Tuesday this week, I looked at my calendar and said, I only have 8 meetings. What a light day. So like really glad to be adding capacity in these critical spaces. And that is the new hires we made in the pipeline. We have some folks around Chief Community Impact Officer. I expect to make a hire in that space in the next week and a half, and have some good folks also who are in, we're chatting with about the deputy role. So I think that like as we move into June, what you'll see is that we are staffing up and have a full complement around leadership, and so are able to really hold more, and that there'll be sort of a steadier arc to how we talk and how we are able to follow up on the things that we've got. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and give Peter the chance to introduce himself to y'all.
Hello. Really appreciate the opportunity to meet everybody here. I have met a few of you so far. I'm incredibly excited to work with this region and with this authority under Mark's leadership. I met Mark years back at a National Alliance to End Homelessness conference. I think it was the first session that had been presented on racial equity, and a bunch of folks from LA pulled them aside and said, "Hey, you know, let's focus on this and let's get going on this." I think we as a sector are a really learning sector. We've learned how to learn, and we've learned how to focus on things that are important. And we are essentially leading the national consciousness on a number of different issues, whether it's racial equity, whether it's harm reduction, whether it's, you know, a trauma-informed approach and a person-centric approach. But I am really grateful for the opportunity to work with this region. LAHSA, the Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority, is a sister agency. It has a very similar profile of, you know, a major city, a county that has a number of different kinds of communities within it, from rural to suburban to urban. Many different challenges. One of the most challenging, thorny issues with housing affordability, and a number of different, you know, drivers for homelessness. And we had a period of explosive growth from 2014 to 2019, which is when I was leading LAHSA. Really appreciated the function of Chief Program Officer when I was in there, and a little less of an appreciation for the Executive Director role, which I'm happy to see that position. Good on you, Mark. But the program, you know, the program world is where I really sort of live and thrive, and I'm really excited to bring the sensibility of someone with deep public housing administration experience and the sense of how those federal programs work, as well as you know, a lot of depth with our service provider community and our lived experience advisory. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to work with you all, and really looking forward to relocating to that community, which I'll do soon. Have not done yet. I'm open to advice on where to go to. So like, let me know where I should be looking. Thank you.
Oh, Peter, I just pulled out of a lease today when I found out that it was a house that somehow had no parking attached to it. None. So yes, we'll have to do that together. As I said, I'm super excited to have Peter join us. I think, you know, as you can see, he has a depth and breadth of experience, as well as like an immediate contextual understanding of what we're working with and trying to do. And because of that, I feel very confident in our ability to work together to identify what the thing is, and then for me to turn to Peter and be like, "You good, right?" And Peter will be good. And that will free me up to do the other things that I'm supposed to be doing. Additionally, as I mentioned, Anne, I think will add an incredible capacity to our ability to communicate clearly and to communicate in a human way. I appreciate your feedback, Gordon, about my slides, because that is how I want us to be, right? I want us to be like, this is what this is, right? As opposed to like some very complicated fiscal year chart. And so that's all I've got for today. And if there are any questions or comments, I'm happy to chat. But otherwise, that concludes my business for the day.
Thank you, Mark, and pleasure to meet you, Peter, too, and welcome to the Authority family here and team. I did notice that Paula had your hand raised. Paula, do you have a question or comment? Oh, okay, no, on accident. All right, but yeah, no, on behalf of the rest of the board here, yeah, thank you for pretty impressive, Mark, for 13 days work, hiring all these great people, building this team, as well as the timeline of the body of work that we have in front of us from now until the projecting to the early part of next year. So thank you for that CEO report. And for board members too, just generally speaking, as now Mark is on board, as we do these meetings in advance, we'll always give Mark a chance at the start to be able to give us any sort of updates for Mark and their team on what they'd like to share for us, for everyone's awareness. So Thank you again, Mark. With that, actually a really good transition to our next item on the agenda, something similar to the flavor of last month's meeting as well, when we were talking about staff structure proposal. That interim went to the governing committee, as was mentioned earlier in this meeting, but also in terms of the initial draft that we had a part of the discussion as a board on our board officers, as well as subcommittees beyond just the structure that we've been operating with Harold and I serving as co-chairs. And so included in your board packet and what we have before us today, with about 20 minutes remaining before a member or two of our board have to log off at 3, want to make sure we had some dedicated time to circle back with you on an updated and final proposal to the board on what this officer and committee structure could look like, given your feedback, and also inclusive of Mark's review. And so with that, I also acknowledge and note that Councilor John Shalmanek's not here at the moment for this meeting, and Sarah and Juanita were unable to attend last month's meeting too. And so really want to just also make sure if there's any questions or information about how we got here and what this looks like, really kind of open that up for board members to have comments to share in that regard. But before we go to that point, maybe I'll pass it on to my co-chair, Harold, if there's any other thoughts and ideas that he has to share before we kind of open that up for conversation and discussion.
Thank you. I have nothing to reply on this. I'm just happy that we're here and able to dive into the work that we have. And I thank those people who have volunteered and jumped forward. And I'm just ready to go. So, okay.
Thanks, Aaron. I think we're all excited about having a little bit more structure, also to support the work that Mark and our staff team will be doing to move the authority forward. And how does really all these committees, as well as our other executive officers, that structure look like to support that work? As I've mentioned in the last meeting, I'm happy to support and serve on the Communications and Board Development Committee as it relates to intergovernmental cooperation, also as a part of the System Planning Committee on any sub-regional planning process and discussions on 5-year plans. I know that most of you had also voiced support or initial thoughts in terms of committees of interest to you that are also documented in our notes here that we just approved from last month's meeting. But again, now I'll just open it up for anyone for additional thoughts or comments in regards to the structure. And again, this is before us as a proposal to consider to approve moving forward with or without specific assignments at the moment.
I raised my hand on purpose this time.
Okay. Go ahead, Paula. Yeah.
I thought we were waiting until Mark came on, and so Mark could look at kind of like what the committees were, because I thought that in the last meeting there was a lot of overlap amongst the different committees, and wanting Mark to identify like what they really wanted as far as committees and in areas of focus. So I'm wondering, are we moving forward with that, or is Mark going to take like a glance at it and then figure out what they would like?
Sorry, we did have the notes and takeaways from the earlier draft. We did share that with Mark. We also walked Mark through that during our co-chairs meeting that Harold and I had with support staff a couple weeks back. But when looking at this actual proposal, this does look like, to your point, Paula, you had raised some good concerns of overlap of committees. And so I see that that's been addressed in some ways here too. But Mark, go ahead for any initial thoughts and feedback upon your review. Yeah,
So I did review it. To me, and I appreciate that concern. To me, there has been work done to clarify. I will also say that some of my concerns in terms of where I saw potential for overlap was less about content and more related to depth, right? So it's like as bodies of work, everything is interrelated. So there's always going to be some overlap. But to me, there was not sufficient overlap triggered if we didn't get too far in the weeds on the thing, right? And I, again, right, I think I've had this conversation with some of you, right? Like the initial design of this board, in terms of the community conversations that led to it, all that work, right, was for this to be a policy board and not an operating board, right? And much of that was because the community said, we want to know that smart people are working on a thing together, right? And so the goal was really to ensure that ultimately me apparently, and the rest of the authority team could come to you all and say like, we're having trouble unwinding this, right? And so when I looked at the way that the groups were structured, I saw that capacity for the team to be able to go to the right touch points and say like, we need to like have a thought partner about like getting this thing going, or you know, we're really struggling on connecting these things, or you know, we need to engage this community, etc. The other thing that allows, I hope, right, is that that's bi-directional. Like in some of my one-on-ones with you all over the last couple of weeks, I think folks have, you know, said like, I've had an idea. And I've been like, that's a really good idea. And we're going to run with it actually, right? So that I think is the goal. And if that's how we are approaching the bodies of work, then I don't think that the idea of overlap is particularly unsettling to me. It's if we start swinging toward like operations, drill down, like things that are like, well, that's what staff should be doing, right? Then I see places where yes, it could be muddy. So I think it's really about having the right sort of flight paths for the conversations and being clear about like what it is that we're trying to get done in those spaces. But I will say, right, if you feel like there is still some lack of clarity around some of the things, I have no problem, now that I have more staff, taking it back and saying like, yeah, we can look at this again, right? Like I also don't think it's a particularly pressing concern based on sort of where we're at and what else we're doing. I think that like, you know, by the time that we're in June, we should have a budget committee, because like I will start having to like bring portions of the supplemental or 22 budget to people for approval. But that's really the only like procedural stamp that I want to make sure that we have.
Thanks, Mark. Paula, did you have any follow-up comments or questions given that? Is that helpful? Okay. Thank you. And just in terms of just my own thoughts and building on what Mark had just shared too, right now, as at least from my own personal perspective, I'm comfortable in moving forward with the structure if the group is as well, partly because it's time to get to work, right? And I also think 3-6 months into this process, as the committees are starting to get into are actually in action, we will fine tune where areas where there might be overlap, or where are those assignments and work duties, and kind of what that workload is for us as volunteer board members too, and where we can dedicate our time given the pressing needs. An example of that being budget, obviously upfront for us here in the coming month, as it has been. But Simha, I see your hand is up.
I was just curious from Mark's perspective, given the sub-regional planning is going to start happening very quickly here, do you see this, I can't remember the name of the committee, the policy committee, playing much of a role in these first couple months?
Yes. And I think that like it will be primarily around helping to identify again which parts of the system we are most concerned about, and think that we do want to prioritize for any like 2022 action, right? That I think is the something that it would be helpful, I think, for that group of folks to have like ID'd as a thing that is going to be like an urgent need. Again, I would say, right, that like you don't have to be thinking like I'm going to be weedy and involved in many conversations about like, but I think it's more along the lines of like, for us to come to you and say, here are things that we have identified, and we would like your thoughts on any prioritization or any background information that you think we don't have, right? Like that kind of stuff, right? So we will, what you can count on us is that like at a given meeting, my team will come with at least 1 or 2 assertions about like, here's what we would like to have a conversation about, right? And in a consent agenda sort of way, right? Like as other folks are like, and, you know, in the same way, you know, Simha, that you were like, what do you think about like a medical role at which level, right? And I was like, yes, that is a good idea, and I don't know yet. Like those kinds of things, I think are all, that flow is what I would like us to be in.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. I'm seeing none. I'll entertain a motion to approve the implementation board officer and committee structure as presented.
So moved.
A motion, is there a second?
Carrie Anderson, second.
Thank you, Pastor Anderson. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and take roll call for this particular vote. Carrie?
Yep, I will go ahead. Carrie Anderson? Yes. Nate Caminos?
Yes.
Paula Carvalho?
Yes.
John Chelmenick is absent. Gordon McHenry Jr.?
Yes.
Harold Odom? You're still muted, Harold. Thumbs up would be good too if I can't hear you. Let's see. Give it just a second. Still can't hear you. Well, I'll come back to you. I'll come back. Oh, there we go. I can hear you now.
Yeah, I hit my mute button. Hit it. I don't know.
Okay, is that yay or nay or abstention?
Yay.
Yay? Okay, great. Thank you, Harold.
You're welcome.
Damian Patnod?
Aye.
Thank you. Adrian Quinn?
Yes.
Michael Ramos?
Yes.
Sarah Rankin?
Yes.
Thank you. Simha Reddy?
Aye.
And Lamont Green? It looks like you're trying to speak, Lamont, but I did not hear you. Can you please?
Yes. Can
yes.
you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes.
I think you said yes. Okay, great. Thank you.
My internet's been unstable things.
That's okay. Thank you. That is all yeses, no nays, one absence, and the vote passes.
All right. Thank you, Carrie, and members of the board. We have us officer and board staff structures, board structures. So thanks for all the work that helped get us here with that. And I know Harold and I reached out to some of you individually too, following up on the April meeting of some ideas of assignments for some of these committees. But as you look through those, know that we'll be following up with Mark and staff too to make sure that we do have these committees, particularly ones that we need to launch right away so that we can get these firmed up and scheduled so we can get to work. So thanks for all that. Now I'll pass it over to Harold if there's anything new for other business.
Does anybody have any suggestions for any business that we haven't covered or like to cover on the next agenda?
Next agenda.
Next agenda.
Okay. Next agenda, I will be bringing some feedback from council in terms of our engagement with certain forms of advocacy, both as the authority and then also as the authority board. In addition, I will also be bringing some feedback from council about our interactions with our parent agencies broadly, again, as it relates to board specifically, board activities specifically. And maybe it just was flagged for me that I don't know that this body has an adopted set of bylaws. And so that might also be a thing.
And counsel, when you say counsel too, just to clarify for the board and the public, legal counsel, correct?
Yes, legal counsel, not a therapist.
Anyone else? Well, I'm just going to put this out there, even though it's belated, to everyone who's listening and to those women on the board, happy belated Mother's Day. We sometimes forget our mother and have to have a belated one, but it's better to have a belated one, and just wish you all and thank you for all the hard work you've done for us, and we love you all. And with that, I'll move for a motion for adjourn.
I do have one item,
okay.
Co-Chair Harold, before, just for our board's awareness too. Just know that Harold and I did recently email Mayor Durkin's office asking that we do have a delegate be recommended to the governing committee to replace the seat that was formerly held by Helen Howe. And prior to Helen's move to interim director role, that replacing Jason that she took over in December. And we've been operating as an implementation board with 11 not fully without that seat for almost 6 months now. We've obviously done a lot of work, even bringing on Mark and all the work that we've done since the start of the year. And so as we embark this work with Mark, their staff, and our subcommittee work to build the foundation of this authority moving forward, we do so with hoping to have a fully represented board as our work continues to get underway. So just wanted to make sure your awareness on that as we continue to try and have that replacement here soon. But thanks, Harold, for that moment.
Thank you, Nate. And remember, we will be reaching out for you also for participation on different things on the board. So we look forward to it. You all look tired. We're having.
I will also say that we've been doing a lot of these meetings.
I will not accept that feedback, Harold. Thank you for noticing. And good day.
I think it's Mark that made all of us tired.
I will share, hey, we've been doing at least monthly meetings since the start of the year. We had a stretch there where we did 6 and 2 months time together. But one thing that I would say, Harold, myself, Mark, and others, that we value is all of your time, all of our time collectively too, right? While you all helped approve allowing us to have up to 2 hours to meet monthly to make sure that we were getting what we needed to do, which is quite a lot to stand up an authority from the implementation board side comparatively to the governing committee. We're going to end an hour sooner than we would have allotted. So we're not going to meet just to meet. Obviously, there are key issues and things to approve, but we will make sure that we're valuing your time. So thanks for just an hour for this time's monthly meeting.
And I have to, so our next meeting is, I have to make sure I put on my glass for this because I have, wow, it's June 9th. And it's scheduled for 2 hours, but it might be an hour and a half, might be an hour. So get in. We'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second. Carry.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining? Thank you all very much, and enjoy the sun outside and the rest of the day. Those of you.
Thanks, Harold. Thanks, Nate. Thanks, Mark. Welcome, Peter.
Mark.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Here.